Hello, my name is Hake Jalepeno. We're going to talk about cutting skills in the kitchen today using a nice sharp knife. The reason we're going to talk about cutting skills is that there's a lot of times that I've done cooking classes or been with people in the kitchen, and I'm always surprised at the way they use a knife. Now, I'm not going to say that there's a wrong way to use a knife necessarily, but there's a safe way and an easy way to use it, and I'd like to cover a little bit of those techniques today. One thing I like to compare it to is when I took lessons for cello, and I was not a good cellist, let's just be clear about that, but one thing that my teacher drilled into me was she was a stickler for proper technique, and so every time I would go and take a lesson, she would make sure that my fingers were pronating properly and I had the cello positioned properly, and when I asked her why, she said that you can certainly play cello and achieve a certain level, but it will become easier and more enjoyable if you have the proper technique, and you will advance further. Well, the same is sort of true with a knife in the kitchen, is you can get a lot of work done with improper technique, but you're going to be safer, your hands aren't going to be cramping, you're going to enjoy your kitchen work more, it'll become more effortless if you have a few techniques that you can remember. Okay, so I'd like to talk a little bit about the grip first. When you're gripping the knife, I see a lot of people grip it from the back here like this, and that's probably a pretty natural way to think of holding a knife. But when you're in the kitchen, you want the maximum balance and control, and so the proper way to grip a knife is really to pinch it between these two fingers right here. So you pinch your knife right on the base of the blade back there, and then your other three fingers actually wrap around the handle of the knife. And just like playing a cello, when the technique will seem awkward at first, this may feel awkward as well, and you're going to say, this doesn't feel right in my hand, but when you practice again and again, it will become like second nature, and it'll feel more comfortable to you. So this is a great grip because the knife is really well balanced in your hand, and you can be more precise with your technique, and there's very little effort that goes into cutting like this as opposed to like this. It's harder to be precise, and so practice with this grip like that and wrap your fingers around. Now, I have seen people do it like this, holding right near the base, and that's fine if that's what works for you, but this to me I found to be the best grip like that. So when we talk about the grip with the knife hand, we should also talk about the grip with the other hand. And so the other hand that's holding the food, and we'll just use this potato as an example, it should be obvious that you don't want to have your fingers sticking out, because that's just an invitation to cut your fingers. So many people use what's called the claw grip, and that's something like this. And you see you're bending your fingers underneath, and then when you take your knife, the actual blade can rest against these knuckles like this, and you can actually cut with it right against those curled fingers, and then your fingers aren't out and able to be cut. So when you put these two techniques together, the holding of the food like this and moving your hand backwards as you're cutting and using the knife grip this way, the next thing that we have to keep in mind is how the knife should actually move on the cutting board. So your tip should stay in contact with the cutting board the whole time, and what happens is it's sort of a rocking motion. The tip stays down and you move like this, sort of this forward fluid motion like that. And when you put that all together, you can see I have the claw grip, and I can move the knife blade right against my knuckle every time, and I can't cut my fingers because it'd be really hard to get the knife way up here. Unless you're being really careless, you can't cut yourself. So take it slow, and you can do this with any type of vegetable. It takes a little bit of practice. A couple other points I'd like to bring up is when you have round things like this, many times people feel a little bit uncomfortable that it's going to roll around. So what you can do is carefully slice it in half like that and put the cut side down, and that way it's not going to move around as much. So with time you get to be a little bit quicker with it, and it really does become second nature. So the same is true when you're cutting something like an onion, a big round out. You don't want to be messing around like this. You want to cut that onion and put a flat side on it. So you can put it like this and cut it. You could cut it in half like that and do your chopping. but that cut side will keep it from rolling around. A couple of other points that I wanted to bring up is when you have a cutting board on a surface, what I always do is put a wet rag or some sort of a cloth underneath, and that actually keeps your cutting board from shifting around too much, because you don't want to have a cutting board that's moving while you're trying to use a very sharp knife. If I don't have this under here, it slides much easier. So this helps keep your cutting board in one place. And another thing I want to emphasize too is having a sharp knife. I've heard many times that a dull knife is a dangerous knife, and that's absolutely true, because a sharp knife is actually going to stay where you put it, and it's not going to shift. But if it's a dull knife and it doesn't bite into whatever you're cutting, it's going to slip off and slide, and that's when accidents are going to happen. So always, always have a sharp knife in the kitchen. And a good example of this is if you take winter squash and you're trying to cut a winter squash open. If it's a dull knife, you have to put a lot more force into it, and you're slamming it on the cutting board and trying to crack it open. Well, that's not safe. But if you have a very sharp knife, you can slice through it with minimal effort. So make sure your knife is sharp. Okay, I hope these tips helped, and I hope that this will keep you safer in the kitchen and enjoy your time. Hello, my name is Hake Jalepeno. I want to talk to you a little bit today about proper knife skills in the kitchen. And I was going to say something and I just forgot what I was going to say. Oh, okay, now I remember what I was going to say. Are we still rolling? Okay. Okay. Hi, my name is Hake Jalepeno, and I want to talk to you a little bit about knife skills in the kitchen.
Comfortably. Close it off again.
All right. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope that these tips will help you be safe.
Yep. I drifted off.